I saw my daughter walking down Madison Avenue yesterday afternoon, and my entire world stopped existing. 3 months ago, I buried Celeste. I stood in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx wearing a black Armani suit that cost $4,000 and felt like it weighed 400 pounds. I watched them lower a sealed mahogany coffin into the ground while rain hammered down on the 150 people who came to mourn my only child. I threw a white rose onto that coffin. I felt the thud when dirt hit wood. I went home to my empty apartment on the Upper East Side and didn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. But yesterday, at 3:47 in the afternoon, I saw Celeste. She was carrying shopping bags from Sephora and Zara. She was wearing jeans I'd never seen before and a green jacket that looked new. Her hair was different, darker, cut shorter than she used to wear it. But I knew. Mothers know. I've spent 56 years on this earth, and 28 of those years were spent studying every single detail of my daughter's face, her walk, the way she moved through the world. I was coming out of my therapist's office on East 72nd Street. Dr. Patricia Sands had just spent 50 minutes trying to convince me that my grief was normal, that the panic attacks were normal, that losing 12 pounds in 3 months was concerning but understandable. She wanted to increase my Xanax dosage. I told her I'd think about it. I walked outside into October sunshine that felt too bright, too cheerful, obscene against the permanent gray that had settled inside my chest. And then I saw her. My brain couldn't process it. For maybe 5 seconds, I just stood there on the sidewalk while people flowed around me like water around a stone. My purse slipped off my shoulder and hit the concrete. I didn't pick it up. All I could do was stare at my daughter walking toward me, alive, breathing, real. Then my body moved before my mind caught up. I ran. I actually ran, something I haven't done in probably 10 years. Not since Richard died, and I stopped caring about staying in shape. My heels clicked frantically on the sidewalk. A man yelled at me when I shoved past him. I didn't care. I crossed the street without looking, and a taxi blared its horn so loud it made my ears ring. "Celeste!" I screamed her name. "Celeste!" She turned. Our eyes met for half a second. I saw her face change, saw something that looked almost like recognition, maybe even fear. Then she turned back around and walked faster. I caught up to her outside a Starbucks. I grabbed her arm with both hands, holding on so tight my knuckles turned white. She spun around and tried to pull away, but I wouldn't let go. I couldn't let go. "Celeste, baby, it's me. It's Mom." "Oh my God! Oh my God! What happened? Where have you been? I buried you. I thought you were dead." The words came out in a rush, all jumbled together, and I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. People were stopping to stare at us. A woman pulled out her phone, probably calling the police or filming for TikTok or whatever people do now when they see something dramatic happening in public. My daughter looked at me like I was insane. "Get the fuck off me." Her voice was cold, disgusted. She yanked her arm hard and I stumbled forward. "I don't know who you are, lady. Let go." No, please, Celeste, it's me. Look at me." I was begging now, sobbing, desperate. My hands were still gripping her jacket. "I'm your mother. Vivienne. You know me, please." She shoved me, hard enough that I fell backward onto the sidewalk. Pain shot through my hip where it hit the concrete. My hands scraped against the rough pavement. The shopping bags fell from her hands and scattered across the ground. "Get away from me, you crazy bitch! I've never seen you before in my life." She was backing away, and there was genuine fear in her eyes now. Fear of me. "Someone call the cops. This woman is attacking me." "I'm not attacking you. I'm your mother. You're Celeste Ann Hartwell. You were born on June 14th, 1997 at Mount Sinai Hospital. You weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces. You had colic for the first 3 months. You hated peas, but loved carrots. Your favorite color is purple. You have a birthmark on your left shoulder blade shaped like Texas." I was still sitting on the sidewalk, looking up at her, rattling off facts like they were evidence in a trial. like I could prove she was my daughter by listing everything I knew about her. She stared at me. Her face was white. "You're fucking insane. Stay away from me." She grabbed what she could of her shopping bags and ran. Actually ran away from me like I was some kind of predator. I watched her disappear into the crowd of pedestrians, and I couldn't move. My body felt like it had been filled with concrete. My heart was beating so fast it hurt. A man in a business suit crouched down next to me. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" I looked at him but didn't really see him. "That was my daughter," I said. My voice sounded hollow, far away. "That was Celeste. She's not dead. She's alive." "Okay, let's get you up." He was trying to help me stand, but his voice had that tone people use when they're talking to someone they think is mentally unstable. Gentle, careful, patronizing. I let him pull me to my feet. My hip throbbed. I could feel blood trickling down my palm where I'd scraped it. People were still watching us, but now they were looking at me with pity instead of concern. They thought I was some grief-stricken woman having a breakdown, a crazy lady who saw her dead daughter in a stranger on the street. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I knew. When the man asked again if he could call someone, I shook my head and walked away. I picked up my purse from where it had fallen earlier. My phone had 3 missed calls from Patricia. She must have seen me run past her office building window like a lunatic. I didn't call her back. I couldn't talk to anyone right now because if I opened my mouth, I would start screaming and never stop. Instead, I followed my daughter. I stayed about 20 feet behind her, ducking into doorways when she slowed down, hiding behind other pedestrians when she turned around to check if I was still there. She was nervous. She kept looking over her shoulder. She walked fast, purposeful, like someone who was trying to get somewhere safe. After 6 blocks, she turned onto Spring Street and went into a building in Soho. It was one of those converted warehouse buildings with expensive lofts that young artists pretend they can afford. She used a key to get inside. I watched through the glass door as she checked her mailbox, then walked to the elevator. I memorized the address, 347 Spring Street. The building looked about 6 stories tall with maybe 12 units total. When I looked up, I could see lights turning on in a window on the 4th floor, northwest corner. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull my phone out of my purse. I took photos of the building, the entrance, the mailboxes visible through the glass door. I didn't know what I was going to do with these photos. I just knew I needed evidence. I needed something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. For 2 hours, I stood across the street and watched that 4th floor window. I saw my daughter pass by it several times. She was pacing. She was on her phone. Once, she stood at the window and looked directly down at the street, and I pressed myself against the wall of the building behind me, terrified she would see me and call the police. The sun started to set. The October air got cold, and I hadn't brought a jacket. I was wearing a cream cashmere sweater and gray slacks. Clothes I'd put on this morning when getting dressed still felt like climbing Mount Everest. My teeth were chattering. My hip hurt. My hands hurt. Nothing made sense. At 6:30, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the building. I recognized it immediately. My stomach dropped straight through the ground. Marcus Devereaux got out. My brother-in-law, Richard's younger brother, the man who held my hand at Celeste's funeral and told me everything would be okay eventually, even though it wouldn't, even though nothing would ever be okay again. The man who had been calling me every week for 3 months to check on me, to make sure I was eating, to offer to come over and keep me company so I wouldn't be alone in my grief. Marcus was carrying 2 white plastic bags that looked like they came from a pharmacy. He used a key to enter the building. He didn't ring a buzzer. He had a key. I watched him disappear inside. 30 seconds later, lights turned on in that 4th floor apartment. Through the window, I could see shapes moving. 2 people. One of them was definitely Celeste. My brain was trying to make this make sense. Maybe she had amnesia. Maybe the accident gave her brain damage and she genuinely didn't remember who she was or who I was. Maybe Marcus had found her wandering somewhere, confused, And he was helping her, taking care of her until she recovered her memory. That had to be it. That was the only explanation that didn't make me want to vomit right there on the sidewalk. I needed to see better. The window was partially open, probably to let in the cool evening air. There was a narrow alley between buildings with a dumpster and some fire escapes. If I could get closer, maybe I could hear what they were saying. Maybe I could understand what was happening. The alley smelled like garbage and piss. I stepped over a puddle of something I didn't want to identify. The fire escape ladder was pulled up, but there were some wooden crates stacked against the wall. I climbed onto them, ignoring the pain in my hip, ignoring the voice in my head that said I was 56 years old and too old for this shit. From the crates, I could just barely see into the apartment window. The angle was wrong. I could only see part of the living room, but it was enough. Marcus was there. Celeste was there. He was holding her arm. She was crying. Her face was red and swollen like she'd been crying for a while. "Please, Uncle Marcus, I don't want to. Not today. Please." Her voice was small, terrified, nothing like the way she'd spoken to me earlier when she called me a crazy bitch. "Nina, we talked about this." Marcus's voice was gentle, patient, the same voice he used with me when he thought I was being irrational. "You need your medication. It helps you stay calm. You know what happens when you don't take it." "Nina." He called her Nina. "I don't feel good when I take it. Everything gets foggy. I can't think straight." She was trying to pull her arm away, but he held tight. "And that woman today, the one who grabbed me, she knew things. She knew about the birthmark. She knew my birthday. She's a disturbed woman who lost her daughter and sees that daughter in every young woman she meets." Marcus was opening one of the plastic bags from the pharmacy. He pulled out a small vial and a syringe. "This is why you can't go out alone, Nina. It's not safe. There are people who might recognize you, who might try to turn you into the police." My blood turned to ice. "But she said my name was Celeste. She said she was my mother." "The girl you killed was named Celeste." Marcus was filling the syringe now, professional and efficient. "That's why you had to disappear. That's why I had to save you. If the police find you, you'll go to prison for vehicular manslaughter. That little girl died because you were texting while driving. Do you want to go to prison?" No, I don't remember. I don't remember any of it." Celeste was crying harder now. "Why can't I remember?" "Trauma. Your mind is protecting you from the memory. That's what the medication helps with. It keeps the bad memories away so you can heal." He was lying. He was lying to her face, and she believed him. My daughter, my brilliant, sharp, skeptical daughter who never believed anything without evidence, was believing this monster's lies because he had her so drugged up she couldn't think straight. "Give me your arm, sweetheart." "No, not today. Please, I want to try to go without it for one day." Marcus's voice changed. The gentleness disappeared. "Nina, give me your arm, now." She was shaking, but she held out her arm. He tied something around her bicep, tapped the vein in the crook of her elbow, and slid the needle in. I watched my daughter's face go slack. I watched her eyes lose focus. I watched her turn into a limp doll in Marcus's arms as he guided her to the couch. I felt vomit rising in my throat. I turned away from the window and threw up next to the dumpster, heaving until there was nothing left in my stomach but bile. My whole body was shaking so hard my teeth clattered together. Marcus had my daughter. He was keeping her drugged. He was keeping her prisoner. He had made her believe she was a murderer, that she had killed someone, that he was protecting her from the police. And 3 months ago, I had buried someone else's body in Woodlawn Cemetery while my daughter was alive and being tortured by the one man I trusted to help me through my grief. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and took photos of the window. I took video. The angle was bad and the light was dim, but I captured what I could. Marcus moving around the apartment, Celeste slumped on the couch, the syringe on the coffee table. Then I climbed down from the crates, walked out of that alley, and called the one person in the world who might actually believe me. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Vivian, where the hell are you? You ran past my window like the building was on fire, and you haven't answered your phone for 4 hours. I'm about to call the police." "Patricia." My voice didn't sound like my own. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to believe me. I know I sound insane. I know what this looks like, but I'm not crazy." "Okay, I'm listening." "Celeste is alive. Marcus has her. He's drugging her. He's keeping her in an apartment in Soho, and he's convinced her that she killed someone and that he's protecting her from the police. Patricia, I saw her. I talked to her. She didn't recognize me because he's made her think her name is Nina and that she's a fugitive. I need help. I need someone to believe me, because if I go to the police right now, they're going to think I'm a grief-stricken woman having a psychotic break." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I held my breath, waiting for her to tell me I needed to check myself into a psychiatric facility. "Where are you right now?" Patricia's voice was calm, professional. "Give me the address." "I'm coming to you." I started crying again, but this time it was relief. 347 Spring Street. I'm across the street. Stay there. Don't do anything. Don't go back to that apartment. I'm 15 minutes away. She hung up. I stood on the sidewalk in Soho as night fell around me, watching that fourth-floor window where my daughter was trapped, and I made myself a promise. I was going to get Celeste back. I was going to destroy Marcus Devereaux, and I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth about what he did, even if it meant burning my entire world down to do it. Patricia arrived in a taxi 20 minutes later. She found me still standing across the street from the building, staring up at that fourth-floor window like I could somehow pull my daughter out of there through sheer force of will. She didn't say anything at first, just put her arm around my shoulders and guided me into a coffee shop 2 blocks away. We sat in a corner booth in the back. Patricia ordered us both decaf tea that neither of us drank. She pulled out a small notebook from her purse, the kind she used during therapy sessions, and clicked her pen. "Tell me everything," she said. "Start from the beginning, not 3 months ago, further back. When did things start feeling wrong?" I wrapped my hands around the teacup, even though it was too hot. The pain felt grounding, real. 9 months ago, maybe 10. Celeste started canceling our lunch dates. We used to meet every Wednesday at this Italian place on 63rd Street. It was our thing. We'd been doing it since she graduated from Parsons 5 years ago. Patricia nodded, writing. What reason did she give? Work at first. She was freelancing as a graphic designer, and she said she had a big project with tight deadlines. I believed her because Celeste always threw herself completely into her work. She got that from me. I stopped, corrected myself. She gets that from me. Present tense. She's alive. Present tense, Patricia agreed softly. What else changed? She stopped posting on Instagram. Celeste used to post her design work constantly. She was building her portfolio, trying to attract bigger clients. Then suddenly, nothing. For weeks. When I asked her about it, she said she was taking a social media break for her mental health. Again, I believed her. She'd been in therapy for anxiety since college. I took a sip of tea. It burned my tongue, but I didn't care. Then the phone calls started getting weird. She'd call me at odd hours, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. She'd say she couldn't sleep, that she felt like someone was watching her. Once she asked me if I thought her apartment was safe, if the locks were good enough. I offered to pay for better locks, a security system, whatever she needed. She said no. She said she was probably just being paranoid. Did she say anything else? Anything specific about who might be watching her? No, and I didn't push. Looking back, I should have pushed harder. I should have known something was seriously wrong. My voice cracked. But I was so used to Celeste pushing me away whenever I tried to get too involved in her life. We had this pattern, you know? I'd try to help, to fix things, to solve her problems. She'd tell me to back off. that she was an adult, that she didn't need her mother hovering. So I backed off. I gave her space. And while I was giving her space, Marcus was destroying her life. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You couldn't have known. Tell me about the last time you saw her before the accident. The accident. That's what we'd all been calling it for 3 months. The accident that killed my daughter. Except there was no accident. There was only Marcus and whatever the hell he did to make everyone believe Celeste was dead. It was late January. We'd been fighting more than usual. I'd gotten her an interview at the agency where I used to work. They were looking for a senior designer, and I knew the creative director. It was a good opportunity, steady income, benefits, a real career path instead of the feast or famine cycle of freelancing. But Celeste didn't see it that way. I could still see her face across the table at that Italian restaurant. She'd been wearing a black turtleneck and her hair was in a messy bun. She looked tired. Too thin. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She accused me of trying to control her life, said I'd never approved of any of her choices, that I was always trying to turn her into some corporate version of herself that fit my definition of success. I told her I just wanted her to be secure, to have stability. We both said terrible things. I closed my eyes. The last thing I said to her was that she was throwing away her potential out of stubbornness. She told me that maybe if I'd spent less time building my career and more time actually being her mother, she wouldn't have so many trust issues. Then she left. She just walked out of the restaurant, and I sat there alone feeling like the worst mother in the world. That was the last conversation you had? No. We texted a few times after that, stiff, formal texts. How are you? Fine. That kind of thing. She was supposed to come over for dinner in February, but she canceled. Said she wasn't feeling well. Then 2 weeks later, the police knocked on my door at 3 a.m. I'd never forget that knock. 3 sharp raps that pulled me out of the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. I'd answered the door in my bathrobe with my hair a mess, and there were 2 police officers standing there with their hats in their hands and expressions that told me everything before they even opened their mouths. They said there'd been an accident on the Brooklyn Bridge. Single-car collision. The car went through the barrier and caught fire. The driver was killed instantly. They found Celeste's purse in the wreckage, her wallet, her phone, and this ring that had belonged to my mother, an emerald ring that I'd given Celeste for her 21st birthday. She never took it off. But no body? Not one that was recognizable. That's what they told me. The fire was so intense that the body was too badly burned for visual identification. They had to use dental records. I felt my stomach turn. Marcus handled all of that. He's a surgeon. He has connections at hospitals with medical examiners. He told me the details were too disturbing, that I shouldn't have to see any of it. He took care of everything. The death certificate, the cremation arrangements. He even helped me plan the funeral. Patricia was writing quickly, her pen scratching across the paper. Who identified the dental records? I don't know. Some medical examiner at the city morgue, I assume. Marcus brought me the paperwork and I signed it. I was barely functional. I'd taken so much Xanax that entire month that I can barely remember it. Patricia, I let him handle everything because I trusted him. Richard's brother, family. He'd been nothing but supportive since Richard died 8 years ago. Why would I question him? You had no reason to question him. What about the funeral? Who was there? Everyone. 150 people. Celeste's friends from Parsons, my colleagues from when I worked at the agency, Richard's old business partners. Marcus gave a eulogy. He talked about how Celeste had been like a daughter to him, how he'd watched her grow up, how devastated he was. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and sharp. He stood up in front of all those people and lied. He cried, actual tears running down his face while my daughter was alive somewhere, probably already drugged out of her mind and being told she was a murderer. Patricia put down her pen. Vivienne, I need to ask you something. and I need you to really think before you answer. Is there any possibility that the woman you saw today wasn't Celeste? That grief and trauma are making you see what you want to see? No. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken. Look at this. That's her. Same birthmark on her shoulder, same scar on her left knee from when she fell off her bike when she was 7. Same way she bites her lower lip when she's nervous. Same everything. And the tatuagem, Patricia. She has a small butterfly tattooed on her left wrist. We got matching ones together 3 years ago after Richard died. It was this bonding thing, something to help us both process grief. I have mine right here. I showed her my own wrist, where a small butterfly was inked into my skin. Patricia looked at it, then at the photo on my phone where you could just barely see the edge of Celeste's sleeve pulled up, revealing the same butterfly. That's pretty compelling evidence, Patricia admitted, but it doesn't explain how. How did Marcus pull this off? How did he fake her death? Whose body was in that car? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I pulled my phone back and scrolled to the video I'd taken through the window. Watch this. Tell me what you see. Patricia watched the short clip of Marcus injecting something into Celeste's arm, watched my daughter's body go limp, watched her eyes lose focus. When it ended, Patricia's face was white. That's not normal medication administration. That's not a vitamin shot or anxiety medication or anything therapeutic. That's sedation. Heavy sedation. She looked up at me. Vivienne, if what you're telling me is true, if Marcus really has been keeping Celeste prisoner for 3 months, drugging her, psychologically manipulating her, this is beyond anything I've ever encountered. This is sociopathic behavior. This is criminal on multiple levels. I know. We need to go to the police, right now. And tell them what? That I saw my dead daughter walking down the street and followed her to an apartment where my brother-in-law, a respected surgeon, is supposedly holding her hostage? Patricia, they'll think I'm insane. They'll think the grief broke me. Especially since Marcus has been documenting my mental state for months. All those phone calls where he'd ask how I was doing, if I was eating, if I was taking my medication. He's been building a case that I'm unstable. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. You might be right. If we go to the police now without more evidence, they'll likely dismiss it as a grief-induced delusion. Marcus will be alerted, and if he really is holding Celeste, he might move her somewhere we can't find her, or worse. The unspoken possibility hung between us, or he might kill her for real this time. So what do we do? I asked. I can't just leave her there? Every minute she's in that apartment, he's destroying more of her mind. Did you hear what he was telling her? That she killed someone? That she's a fugitive? He's convinced her that her entire identity is a lie, that she's someone named Nina who's running from the police. How long before she can't come back from that? Patricia pulled out her phone. I have a friend, Jake Chen. He's a private investigator, former NYPD detective who left the force and went private 5 years ago. He's good, he's discreet, and he owes me a favor. Let me call him. While Patricia made the call, I stared at the photos on my phone. Celeste getting out of a car. Celeste entering the building. Celeste's face in the window, slack and empty from whatever drugs Marcus had pumped into her system. 3 months. He'd had her for 3 months. What had he done to her in that time? How had he convinced her that she wasn't Celeste Hartwell, that she was some other person entirely? And why? That was the question that made my head spin. Why would Marcus do this? What could he possibly gain from faking my daughter's death and keeping her prisoner? Patricia ended her call. Jake can meet us tomorrow morning. He wants to hear everything, see all your evidence, and then he'll start digging. He says if Marcus forged dental records and got a medical examiner to sign off on a false death certificate, there will be a paper trail. Documents can be faked, but they leave traces. He'll find them. Tomorrow morning. That's 12 hours from now. 12 more hours that Celeste is in there with him. I know, but if we move too fast, too recklessly, we could lose our chance to get her back safely. We need to be smart about this. strategic. Patricia looked at me with her therapist face, the one that said she was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear. And Vivian, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that when we do get her out, she might not be the same Celeste you remember. Psychological trauma, especially combined with long-term drugging, can cause significant changes in personality and cognition. She might not bounce back quickly. This could take years of therapy to undo. I don't care. I just need her alive and away from him. We'll deal with everything else after. Patricia paid for the tea we hadn't drunk, and we left the coffee shop. She insisted on taking me home, but I made her drive past the building one more time. The lights were still on in the fourth-floor apartment. I wondered if Celeste was awake, or if she was passed out on that couch, trapped in whatever pharmaceutical fog Marcus had created for her. When we finally got to my apartment building on East 74th Street, Patricia walked me all the way up to my door. "Try to get some sleep," she said. "Take your medication. I'll pick you up at 8 tomorrow morning and we'll meet Jake." "Patricia?" I grabbed her hand before she could leave. "Thank you for believing me, for not thinking I'm crazy." "You're not crazy. You're a mother who knows her child. That instinct is never wrong." She squeezed my hand back. "We're going to get her back, Vivian. I promise you." After she left, I went inside and deadbolted the door behind me. My apartment felt different now, wrong somehow. I'd spent 3 months turning it into a shrine to grief. Celeste's photos were everywhere. Her favorite blanket was still draped over the couch. I'd kept her room exactly as she'd left it the last time she stayed over 2 years ago. I walked into that room now and sat on her bed. Everything smelled like dust and absence. On her nightstand was a photo of the two of us from her college graduation. We were both smiling. Celeste was wearing her cap and gown, and I had my arm around her shoulders. We looked happy. We looked like we loved each other. I picked up the photo and held it against my chest. "I'm coming for you, baby," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm going to bring you home. I promise." Jake Chen was nothing like I expected. When Patricia said private investigator, I pictured someone out of a noir film. Rumpled suit, cigarette hanging from his lip, cynical attitude. Instead, Jake was 38 years old, wore a neat button-down shirt and khakis, and showed up to our meeting with a leather messenger bag full of tech equipment that looked like it cost more than my car. We met at Patricia's office at 8 in the morning. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Celeste's face when Marcus pushed that needle into her arm. I'd taken a shower at 6, put on black pants and a white blouse, and tried to make myself look like a credible person instead of a woman who'd spent the night mentally cataloging all the ways she'd failed as a mother. Jake listened to my entire story without interrupting. He took notes on a tablet, occasionally asking me to repeat specific details, times, dates, exact addresses. When I showed him the photos and video from last night, he studied them for a long time, zooming in on Celeste's face, on the syringe, on Marcus's profile in the window. "This is compelling," he said finally, "but it's not enough to take to the police yet. Any halfway decent lawyer would argue that this video shows a doctor administering medication to a patient. We need to establish that the woman in this video is actually Celeste Hartwell, not someone named Nina who happens to look like her. She has the same tattoo, the same birthmark, the same scar." My voice came out harder than I intended. "What more proof do you need?" "Legal proof. The kind that holds up in court." Jake set down his tablet and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Hartwell, I believe you. I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I can tell when someone is having a grief-induced delusion versus when they're telling the truth. You're telling the truth. But believing you isn't enough. We need documentation. We need to prove that the body you buried 3 months ago wasn't your daughter. We need to prove that Marcus Devereaux had motive and opportunity to fake her death. And we need to figure out why the hell he did it in the first place." Patricia leaned forward. "Where do we start?" "The death certificate and dental records. If Marcus forged those documents, there will be inconsistencies. I have a contact at the medical examiner's office who owes me a favor. I can get copies of the original files and have a forensic document examiner look at them. Jake pulled out his phone and started typing. I'll also run a full background check on Marcus. Financial records, property holdings, medical malpractice suits, anything that might give us insight into why he'd do something this extreme. How long will that take? I asked. 2, maybe 3 days for the preliminary information, longer for the deep dive. He looked up at me. I know that's not what you want to hear, but we need to be thorough. If we move too fast and tip Marcus off, he could disappear with your daughter, and we might never find them. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to go back to that apartment, break down the door, and drag Celeste out of there myself. But I knew Jake was right. I'd built a successful career by being strategic, by playing the long game. This was no different, except it was my daughter's life at stake, which made it completely different. Fine, 3 days, but I'm not sitting around doing nothing while you investigate. What can I do? Jake considered this. Do you have access to any of Celeste's personal belongings? Computer, journals, files, anything she might have kept at your place? She has a room in my apartment. I haven't touched anything since the funeral. Good. Go through it. Look for anything unusual. Pay attention to her laptop if you can access it. Email correspondence, bank statements, anything that might tell us what was happening in the months before her disappearance. People usually leave trails, even when they don't mean to. Patricia added, and Vivienne, you need to maintain your normal routine as much as possible. If Marcus has been monitoring you, and I suspect he has, any sudden change in behavior will alert him. Keep taking his phone calls. Keep acting like the grieving mother he expects you to be. The thought of hearing Marcus's voice, of pretending everything was normal while I knew he had my daughter locked in an apartment in Soho, made my stomach turn. But I nodded. I can do that. We spent another hour going over details. Jake wanted to know everything about Marcus. His schedule, his habits, his relationship with Celeste growing up. I told him what I could remember. Marcus had always been around after Richard died. He'd come to family dinners, remembered Celeste's birthday, offered to help with college application essays. He'd seemed like a good uncle, present, but not overbearing. Now I wondered if every interaction had been part of some long game I couldn't see. Had he been watching Celeste all those years? Planning this? When we finally left Patricia's office, Jake promised to call as soon as he had any information. Patricia insisted on driving me home. On the way, my phone rang. Marcus's name lit up the screen. I looked at Patricia. She nodded. I answered. Vivian, hi. I was just checking in, making sure you're doing okay. His voice was warm, concerned, exactly the same as it had been for the past 3 months. Like he was actually worried about me. Like he hadn't destroyed both our lives. I'm managing, I said. My voice sounded stiff, even to my own ears. Same as always. Have you been taking the medication Dr. Sanz prescribed? You know how important it is to stay on top of your mental health right now. Mental health? He kept bringing that up, building his case that I was unstable, unreliable. Yes, I'm taking it. Good. Listen, I'm actually going to be in your neighborhood this afternoon. I have a consult at Lenox Hill. Want me to stop by? I could bring lunch. That Thai place you like. The thought of sitting across from him, eating pad Thai, and pretending I didn't know what he'd done, felt impossible. But Patricia was shaking her head at me, mouthing the word normal. That would be nice, I forced out. Around 1? Perfect. I'll see you then. Take care of yourself, Vivian. He hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. You did well, Patricia said. I know that was hard. He's coming to my apartment. I have to sit there and have lunch with him and act normal. I felt like I was going to throw up again. How am I supposed to do that? You're going to remember that every minute you keep him convinced you're just a grieving mother is another minute we have to build our case and get Celeste back safely. You're stronger than you think, Vivian. You've survived losing your husband and thinking you lost your daughter. You can survive lunch with Marcus. When we got to my building, Patricia came upstairs with me, We went straight to Celeste's room. It looked exactly the same as it had last night, frozen in time. A museum of my daughter's life before everything fell apart. Her laptop was on the desk, closed. I opened it and was immediately met with a password screen. I tried the obvious ones: her birthday, my birthday, Richard's birthday. None of them worked. Patricia suggested I try combinations. After 15 attempts, I got it. The date Richard and I got married, followed by the number of Celeste's childhood apartment. July 15th, 1989, apartment 7B, July 15897B. The laptop opened. I felt like I'd broken into a vault. Patricia sat next to me as I went through files. Celeste's design portfolio, client correspondence, mostly routine stuff. But then I found a folder labeled Personal Financial that had been modified 2 weeks before her death. Inside were bank statements going back 2 years. I started reading, and my blood went cold. Look at this, I pointed at the screen. These are withdrawals from her trust fund, the one Richard set up for her. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, 20,000. They're all approved by both trustees. That's me and Marcus. Patricia leaned closer. But you didn't approve these? I've never seen these statements before. I check my email regularly. I should have gotten notifications for every withdrawal over $5,000. That was the term Richard set up. I kept scrolling. Oh my God. Over the past 2 years, almost $900,000 has been withdrawn from this account. I approved maybe $50,000 of that for her tuition and apartment deposit. The rest of this, these signatures, they're forgeries. Marcus was stealing from her. Not just stealing, systematically draining her inheritance. I felt rage building in my chest so intense it was hard to breathe. Richard left her almost $2 million. Marcus was supposed to help me manage it until she turned 30. He was family. We trusted him. I kept clicking through files. Then I found the emails, a folder labeled Urgent that Celeste had created in January. I opened it. The first email was from Celeste to Marcus, dated January 10th. The subject line read, "We need to talk immediately. Marcus, I've been going through my bank statements and I've noticed some irregularities with my trust fund. Large withdrawals that I didn't authorize and that my mother says she didn't authorize either. I need you to explain this to me ASAP. I'm trying not to jump to conclusions, but this looks really bad. Please call me when you get this." His response came the same day. "Celeste, I think there's been some confusion. Those withdrawals were all discussed and approved by your mother. I have the signed authorization forms in my files. I'm happy to send them to you. Can we meet this week to go over everything? I don't want you to worry unnecessarily." Her reply was immediate. "I talked to my mom. She says she never signed anything for withdrawals that large. Marcus, you need to tell me the truth. Did you take money from my account? Because if you did, that's theft. That's illegal. I need answers now." After that, there was nothing from Marcus. But there were drafts in Celeste's sent folder. Emails she'd written but never sent. One to a lawyer, asking about legal options for recovering stolen funds from a trustee. One to me, apologizing for being distant and explaining that she'd discovered something terrible about Uncle Marcus, but didn't want to tell me until she had proof, because she knew how much I relied on him for support. And then, most chilling, an email draft to the police. "To whom it may concern, I need to report a crime. My name is Celeste Ann Hartwell, and I believe my uncle and trust fund co-administrator, Dr. Marcus Devereaux, has been embezzling money from my inheritance. I have documentation showing unauthorized withdrawals totaling nearly $900,000 over the past 2 years. I'm also concerned because I've noticed him watching my apartment. I think he's been following me. I'm scared of what he might do if he knows I've discovered his theft. I need help." She never sent it. 3 days after she wrote that draft, she died. Patricia and I sat in silence, staring at the screen. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so ugly I could barely look at it. "He killed her," I said quietly. "Or he tried to. When she threatened to expose him, he tried to kill her. But something went wrong, or he changed his mind, and instead he faked her death and kept her prisoner. Maybe he thought he could convince her to keep quiet. Maybe he's just insane. But Patricia, he was going to murder my daughter over money. We need to show this to Jake immediately. These emails are evidence of motive. Patricia pulled out her phone and took photos of the screen. This changes everything. I kept digging through Celeste's files. I found more. Documents she'd downloaded showing Marcus's financial situation. He was drowning in debt. Medical malpractice suits from former patients. 3 ex-wives who'd taken him to the cleaners in divorce court. A gambling problem he'd apparently kept hidden from everyone. He owed over $3 million to various creditors. Celeste had been doing her own investigation before he stopped her. She'd even hired a forensic accountant who'd traced some of the stolen money to offshore accounts in Marcus's name. She was going to destroy him, I said. She had everything she needed to send him to prison, so he had to stop her. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Looking forward to lunch. I'm bringing that mango salad you love. I felt hatred so pure it was almost cleansing. This man had eaten meals in my home. He'd hugged me at Richard's funeral. He'd held my hand at Celeste's fake funeral. And the entire time, he'd been a monster wearing a human face. Patricia called Jake and explained what we'd found. He told us to photograph everything, not to touch anything else, and that he was accelerating his investigation. He'd have preliminary results by end of day. At 12:30, Patricia left so she wouldn't be there when Marcus arrived. I spent 30 minutes trying to compose myself. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced looking normal. Sad, but holding it together. The grieving widow who'd now lost her daughter too. Not the woman who knew the truth. Not the mother planning to destroy the man who'd taken everything from her. At exactly 1 o'clock, Marcus knocked on my door. I opened it, and there he was. Tall, distinguished-looking, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing an expensive suit, carrying a bag of Thai food and a sympathetic smile. "Vivian, you look tired. Are you sleeping at all?" "Not much," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "But that's normal, I guess. Dr. Sanz says it'll get easier eventually." "It will. I promise." He set the food down on my kitchen counter and started unpacking containers. "Grief has stages. You're still in the acute phase. Give it time." I watched him move around my kitchen like he belonged there, opening drawers to find utensils, grabbing plates from the cabinet, making himself at home. "Have you thought any more about my suggestion?" he asked as he spooned pad thai onto plates. "About maybe getting away for a while? A trip might do you good. Help you reset." A trip. Away from New York, away from witnesses, away from the apartment where he was keeping my daughter. I don't know. It feels wrong to leave, like I'd be abandoning Celeste's memory or something. Celeste would want you to take care of yourself. She'd want you to heal. He brought the plates to the table and sat down across from me. "You know she loved you, right? Despite your arguments, she knew you were just trying to help her." I forced myself to take a bite of mango salad. It tasted like cardboard. "Did she?" Sometimes I wonder if she died thinking I was just this controlling harpy who never approved of anything she did. She didn't think that. I talked to her shortly before the accident, actually. She mentioned wanting to reach out to you, to fix things between you two. She knew the argument was partly her fault. He was lying so smoothly, not a flicker of hesitation. I think she was planning to call you that week. And then the accident happened. I wanted to throw my plate at his face. I wanted to scream that I knew everything. But I kept my expression neutral, kept eating, kept playing the role of the grieving mother who believed every word he said. "That makes me feel a little better," I said softly. "Thank you for telling me." We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I'm sorry. I need to take this. Hospital emergency." He stepped into the hallway to talk. I could hear his voice, muffled but urgent. When he came back, He looked stressed. "I have to go. One of my surgical patients is having complications. I'm sorry to eat and run." "No, of course. Go. I hope everything's okay." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, then turned back. "Vivienne, I mean it about the trip. You should really consider it. Maybe Florida? Somewhere warm. You could stay with my friend's beach house in Naples. It's beautiful this time of year. I'll think about it." After he left, I locked the door and leaned against it, shaking. I'd done it. I'd sat across from the man who had my daughter prisoner and pretended everything was fine. But it had cost me something. I felt dirty, complicit somehow, like by not exposing him, right then I was betraying Celeste all over again. My phone rang. "Jake." I got the preliminary results back from my contact at the medical examiner's office. "Vivienne, you need to sit down." I sat. "Tell me." The death certificate for Celeste Ann Hartwell was signed by Dr. Simone Keller. She's a junior medical examiner who's been with the office for 3 years. When my contact pulled her file, something interesting came up. Dr. Keller did her medical residency at Lenox Hill Hospital 5 years ago. Her supervising physician was Marcus Devereaux. My heart was pounding. They knew each other. More than that, my contact did some digging. Apparently, there were rumors about an inappropriate relationship between Keller and Devereaux during her residency. She was engaged to someone else at the time. The engagement ended abruptly. 6 months later, Keller transferred to a different hospital. There was also an incident, some kind of medical error that was quietly buried in paperwork. A patient died under Keller's care, but there was no formal investigation. Marcus Devereaux was the attending physician who signed off on the death as natural causes. He has something on her. He's blackmailing her. That's my working theory. I'm trying to get more details, but this takes time. Medical records are protected. I might need to approach Dr. Keller directly. Do it, whatever it takes. I stood up and started pacing. "Jake, Marcus was just here. He suggested I take a trip out of state, to Florida. He has a friend with a beach house in Naples." There was a pause. "He's trying to get you away from New York. Vivienne, I think he's planning something. Either he knows you're suspicious, or he's planning to move Celeste and wants you distracted. We need to accelerate this. What do we do?" "I'm going to contact Dr. Keller today, try to get her to talk. If she admits to forging the death certificate, we have enough to go to the police." He hesitated. "But I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, you don't go back to that apartment in Soho. You don't try to confront Marcus. You let me handle this." I didn't promise. I couldn't. Because I knew if it came down to it, if Celeste was in danger, I would do whatever it took to save her, even if it meant putting myself at risk. After I hung up with Jake, I went back to Celeste's room. I lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Marcus had been stealing from my daughter for years. When she discovered it, he'd tried to kill her. Instead, he'd created this elaborate fiction where she was dead and no one would look for her. He'd kept her drugged and confused, convinced her she was a different person, a criminal, someone who had to hide from the world. And I'd believed him. For 3 months, I'd believed every lie while my daughter suffered. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." I stared at the message. Marcus didn't have this number. I changed my phone 3 weeks ago when I kept getting spam calls. I'd only given the new number to Patricia, Jake, and a handful of other people. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I was investigating. I forwarded the message to Jake and Patricia. Then I went to every window in my apartment and closed the curtains. I checked every lock twice. I grabbed a kitchen knife and put it on my nightstand. If Marcus thought he could scare me into backing off, he was wrong. I'd already lost my daughter once. I'd already buried her and mourned her and felt like my world had ended. Now that I knew she was alive, nothing would stop me from getting her back. Not threats, not fear, not even the law if it came to that. I was her mother, and I was going to bring her home. Jake called me at 11 o'clock that night. I hadn't slept. I'd been sitting in my living room with all the lights off, watching the street below through a gap in the curtains, convinced that Marcus had someone watching my building. "I found Dr. Simone Keller," Jake said without preamble. "And Vivienne, she's ready to talk." I sat up straight. "What do you mean, ready to talk?" "I tracked her down at a bar in Hell's Kitchen. She was alone, drinking heavily. I approached her, told her who I was and what I was investigating. She broke down immediately, started crying right there at the bar. She said she's been waiting for someone to figure it out, that she can't live with what she did anymore." My hands were shaking. What did she say? Did she admit to forging the death certificate? She admitted to everything. Marcus blackmailed her. 5 years ago, during her residency, she made a mistake that killed a patient. Wrong medication dosage. The patient was an elderly man with no family, no one to ask questions. Marcus was her supervising physician. He covered it up, falsified the records to make it look like natural causes. He told her he was protecting her, that he cared about her career, but he kept documentation of what really happened. He's been holding it over her head ever since. I closed my eyes. So when he needed someone to fake Celeste's death certificate, he went to Simone, told her he'd expose the medical error if she didn't help him. She had no choice. She was terrified of losing her medical license, going to prison. So she signed the death certificate for Celeste Ann Hartwell, even though she never examined the body. Marcus provided her with falsified dental records that matched a Jane Doe who'd been brought into Lenox Hill 2 weeks before Celeste's supposed accident. Homeless woman, mid-20s, no ID, no family. She died of an overdose. Marcus kept her body in the morgue, claimed it for research purposes. When he needed a body for the car accident, he used her. I felt sick. There's a family somewhere who never found out what happened to their daughter. Some mother who'll never know her child is dead because Marcus needed a corpse. Simone has copies of everything. The original death report for the Jane Doe, the falsified dental records, text messages from Marcus with instructions. She's been keeping it all as insurance in case he ever tried to destroy her completely. She wants to come forward. She wants to testify. When? How soon can we go to the police? Tomorrow morning. I've already contacted a detective I trust, someone who won't dismiss this as crazy. Simone agreed to meet us at the precinct at 9 a.m. She'll give a full statement and turn over all the documentation. Once we have that on record, we can move on Marcus. Jake paused. But Vivienne, there's something else. Something Simone told me that you need to hear. My stomach dropped. What? Marcus has been drugging Celeste with a combination of benzodiazepines and a dissociative anesthetic called ketamine. Heavy doses. The kind of doses that cause memory loss, confusion, make someone highly suggestible. Simone said he's been increasing the dosage over the past month. She knows because he's been getting the medications through her, claiming they're for his private practice patients. But the quantities he's requesting are way beyond normal therapeutic use. What does that mean? What's he doing to her? Simone thinks he's trying to completely erase Celeste's identity. The longer she's on those drugs, the more damage it does to her memory, her sense of self. Simone said if he keeps her on that regimen much longer, the psychological damage might be permanent. She might never fully recover who she was. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. We have to get her out of there tonight, right now. We can't wait until morning. Vivienne, no. We need to do this the right way. With the police, with proper backup. If you go in there alone, if something goes wrong, Marcus could hurt Celeste or you or both of you. We're so close to having everything we need to take him down legally. Please just wait 12 more hours. 12 hours. While my daughter's brain was being systematically destroyed by chemicals. While Marcus pumped more poison into her veins and told her more lies about who she was. 12 hours could be the difference between Celeste coming back to herself or being lost forever. I can't, I said. I'm sorry, Jake. I know you're trying to help, but I can't leave her there for another night knowing what he's doing to her. Vivienne, listen to me. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone so he couldn't call back and try to talk me out of what I was about to do. I went to my bedroom and changed into dark clothes. Black jeans, black sweater, black running shoes I hadn't worn since before Richard died. I put my hair in a ponytail. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the kitchen knife I'd put on my nightstand earlier. Then I stopped and really looked at myself in the mirror. I was 56 years old. I hadn't done anything remotely physical in years. I had no plan beyond getting to that apartment and somehow getting my daughter out. This was insane. This was the kind of thing that got people killed. But Celeste was in there. My baby. And every minute I waited was a minute Marcus had to destroy more of who she was. I called an Uber. 20 minutes later, I was standing across the street from 347 Spring Street, staring up at that fourth-floor window. The lights were on. I could see movement inside. Marcus's Mercedes was parked at the curb. He was in there with her right now. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. I'd turned it back on during the Uber ride. Patricia's name flashed on the screen, then Jake's, then Patricia again. They knew what I was planning. They were trying to stop me. I ignored the calls and crossed the street. The building's front door was locked, but there was a pizza delivery guy coming out. I caught the door before it closed and slipped inside. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked who I was or where I was going. Security in these converted warehouse buildings was always terrible. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. Quieter. 4 flights up, and by the time I reached the 4th floor, my legs were shaking and I was breathing hard. I was so out of shape it was embarrassing. But I kept moving. The hallway was dimly lit and empty. I could hear muffled sounds from behind different doors. Television, music, someone having an argument. Normal sounds of people living their normal lives while my daughter was being held prisoner 20 feet away. Unit 4C, the northwest corner apartment. I stood in front of the door and pressed my ear against it. Voices inside, Marcus's voice, calm and measured. "Nina, you need to hold still. This will help you sleep. You know you sleep better after your medicine." "I don't want to sleep. My head feels wrong. Everything feels wrong." Celeste's voice, and it broke my heart how small she sounded, how frightened. Nothing like my sharp, confident daughter. "Please, can we skip it tonight? Just one night?" You know what happens when you skip your medicine. The bad thoughts come back, the memories of what you did. You don't want that, do you? No, I don't want that. I tried the doorknob. Locked, obviously. I could kick it in, but that would alert Marcus and give him time to react. I could knock, but he'd look through the peephole and see me and definitely wouldn't open the door. Then I remembered something. A trick Richard had shown me years ago when I'd locked myself out of our apartment. If the lock was old enough, if you had a credit card and the right angle. I pulled out my credit card and slid it between the door and the frame, right at the lock. I wiggled it, applying pressure, praying this would work. Old building, old locks, maybe I'd get lucky. The lock clicked. The door opened. I stepped inside my daughter's prison, and everything changed forever. The apartment was smaller than it had looked from the outside. I stepped into a narrow entryway that opened into a living room with bare white walls and minimal furniture. A couch, a coffee table, a television mounted on the wall. Everything was clinical, sterile, like a hospital room pretending to be a home. The air smelled like disinfectant and something else, something chemical I couldn't identify. Marcus and Celeste were in the living room. He had his back to me, standing over my daughter who was sitting on the couch. He was holding a syringe, preparing to inject her. Celeste was crying, her face turned away from him, her whole body rigid with tension. Neither of them had heard me come in. I had maybe 3 seconds before Marcus turned around. 3 seconds to decide how to handle this. I had a kitchen knife in my jacket pocket, but the thought of actually using it, of stabbing someone, made my stomach turn. I wasn't a violent person. I'd never hurt anyone in my life. But this man had taken my daughter. He'd destroyed 3 months of her life. He was about to pump more poison into her veins. "Get away from her." My voice came out louder than I intended, sharp and commanding. The voice I used to use in boardrooms when I needed people to listen. Marcus spun around. For a split second, I saw genuine shock on his face. Then it transformed into something else, something calculating. "Vivienne, what are you doing here?" He kept his body between me and Celeste, and he was still holding that syringe. "How did you find this place?" "I saw her. 4 days ago on Madison Avenue. I followed her here. I know everything, Marcus. I know you faked her death. I know you've been drugging her. I know about the money you stole." I took a step forward. "Move away from my daughter, right now." Celeste was staring at me with wide, confused eyes. She looked worse than she had through the window. Her skin was gray, her cheeks hollow. She'd lost weight. Her hair was dirty and tangled, but she was alive. She was right there. "Mom?" The word came out hesitant, uncertain. "Is that really you, or am I hallucinating again?" "It's really me, baby. I'm here. I'm going to take you home." Marcus laughed, actually laughed. "Take her home? Vivienne, do you hear yourself? You sound insane. This is Nina. She's a patient under my care. I don't know what grief-induced fantasy you've constructed, but you need to leave before I call the police." "Call them, please. I'd love for you to explain to the police why you have a patient who looks exactly like my daughter, who has the same tattoo, the same birthmark, the same scar on her knee. I'd love for you to explain the $900,000 you embezzled from her trust fund." Something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or rage. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You're having a breakdown, Vivienne. This is what happens when grief isn't properly managed. You start seeing things that aren't there, creating elaborate conspiracies." "I have proof. Celeste's laptop, all the emails where she confronted you about stealing from her, bank records showing the unauthorized withdrawals, and I have Dr. Simone Keller ready to testify that you blackmailed her into faking the death certificate." I was making my voice as steady as possible, trying not to show how terrified I actually was. "It's over, Marcus. You're done." He was quiet for a long moment, then he smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "You always were smarter than you looked. Richard used to say that. Said you had a mind like a steel trap under all that suburban housewife bullshit." He glanced at Celeste, then back at me. "But you know what? You're still too late." "What does that mean?" "It means your daughter is gone, Vivienne. Celeste doesn't exist anymore. What's sitting on this couch is Nina Rousseau, a troubled young woman with a drug problem and a history of psychotic episodes. She doesn't remember being Celeste. She doesn't remember you. 3 months of ketamine and benzodiazepines have seen to that. Her memories are Swiss cheese. Even if you take her out of here, even if you prove everything you just said, she'll never be the same." I looked at Celeste. She was staring at Marcus now, and I could see something working behind her eyes. Confusion. Fear. But maybe something else too. A spark of recognition. "He's lying," I said directly to her. "Your name is Celeste Ann Hartwell. You're 28 years old. You're a graphic designer. Your father's name was Richard. He died 8 years ago from pancreatic cancer. You have a butterfly tattoo on your left wrist that matches mine because we got them together after his funeral. You hate peas. You love purple. When you were 7, you fell off your bike and cut your knee so badly it needed 12 stitches. And you were so brave you didn't cry once, even though I was crying enough for both of us." Celeste's hand went to her wrist, touching the tattoo. "I remember there was someone with me at the tattoo parlor, a woman. She held my hand. That was me. That was your mother. I'm your mother." "No." Marcus's voice was sharp. "Nina, don't listen to her. She's the one who's lying. Remember what I told you? Remember what you did?" "I killed someone." Celeste's voice was shaking. "A little girl, in a car accident. I was texting and driving, and she ran into the street and I hit her." "That never happened." I took another step forward. Marcus tensed. "He made that up. You didn't kill anyone. You were going to expose him for stealing from you, so he tried to kill you instead. He faked your death, and he's been keeping you here, drugging you, making you believe you're someone else. She's having delusions, Marcus said to Celeste. This is exactly what I warned you about. People from your old life might find you and try to confuse you. The medication keeps you grounded in reality. The medication is destroying your brain, I said. Celeste, baby, I need you to trust me. I need you to remember. Think hard. Before you woke up here, before all of this, what's the last thing you actually remember? Celeste closed her eyes. Her face was scrunched up in concentration. I remember my apartment, my real apartment in Brooklyn. I remember being scared. Someone was watching me. I found cameras, little cameras hidden in my apartment. Her eyes opened and locked on Marcus. You put cameras in my apartment. Nina, you're confused. Don't call me that. Suddenly Celeste was on her feet, and despite how weak she looked, there was strength in her voice. My name isn't Nina. I remember now. I remember finding the cameras. I remember going through my bank statements and seeing money disappear. I remember emailing you. I remember threatening to go to the police. Marcus's expression changed. The mask of concerned doctor slipped, and underneath was something ugly. You stupid girl. You couldn't just leave it alone. You couldn't just trust that I knew what was best. You stole from me. You spied on me. Celeste swayed on her feet, grabbing the back of the couch for support. What did you do to me? Why can't I remember anything after that? Because I stopped you. Marcus was done pretending now. His voice was cold, matter-of-fact. You were going to destroy me, ruin everything I'd built. Over what? Money. Money that should have been mine anyway. Richard was my brother. That fortune should have been split between us, not hoarded by his widow and his spoiled daughter. So you tried to kill her. I could barely get the words out. I did kill her. Celeste Hartwell is dead and buried. I made sure of it. Switched the dental records, bribed the right people, forged the right documents. It was actually quite elegant. And this, he gestured at my daughter. This is my insurance policy. As long as I keep her confused and compliant, as long as nobody believes she's really Celeste, I'm safe. The money's been moved offshore. By the time anyone untangles my finances, I'll be in a country with no extradition treaty. You're insane. The words came out as a whisper. No, I'm practical. And you, Vivian, you're a problem I should have dealt with months ago. He moved fast, faster than I expected for a man his age. He grabbed Celeste by the arm and pulled her in front of him like a shield. The syringe was at her neck now, pressed against her carotid artery. Back up, get out of this apartment, and forget you ever came here, or I inject this entire dose into her jugular and she's dead in 30 seconds. Marcus, don't! I said back up! He was shouting now, spit flying from his mouth. His careful composure was completely gone. You think I won't do it? I've already killed her once. I'll do it again. At least this time there'll be a real body to bury. Celeste was frozen in his grip, her eyes locked on mine. Terrified but also focused. More focused than she'd been since I arrived. The adrenaline was cutting through the fog of drugs. She was coming back to herself. Okay. I held up my hands, trying to look non-threatening. Okay, I'm backing up. Just don't hurt her, please. I took 2 steps backward, moving toward the door. Marcus relaxed slightly. That was his mistake. Celeste drove her elbow backward into his solar plexus with everything she had. I heard the air whoosh out of his lungs. The syringe fell from his hand and hit the floor, rolling under the couch. Celeste twisted away from him and ran toward me. Mom! I caught her as she stumbled. She was crying, holding on to me so tight I could barely breathe. I've got you, baby. You're safe now. Marcus was on his knees, gasping for air. I should have left right then. Should have grabbed Celeste and run out of that apartment and straight to the police. But I'd spent 3 months thinking my daughter was dead. 3 months of grief and guilt and pain. 3 months of this man pretending to comfort me while he tortured my child. I pulled the kitchen knife out of my pocket. "Vivian, don't." Celeste's voice was sharp. "Don't do something you can't take back. He's not worth it." She was right. He wasn't worth it. But God, I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel a fraction of what he'd done to us. Instead, I kept the knife pointed at him and pulled out my phone with my other hand. I called 911. "I need police at 347 Spring Street, apartment 4C. I've just rescued my daughter from a kidnapping. The kidnapper is Marcus Devereaux. He's a doctor at Lenox Hill Hospital. He faked my daughter's death 3 months ago and has been holding her prisoner. Send someone now." The operator was asking questions, but I could already hear sirens, close, really close. I looked out the window and saw 3 police cars pulling up outside the building, lights flashing. "Did you—" I looked at Celeste. "I hit the panic button on my phone when you first came in," she said. Her voice was getting stronger, clearer. "There's an app for emergencies. I set it up months ago, before everything happened. I didn't know if it still worked, if anyone would actually come, but I pressed it anyway." Jake Chen burst through the door first, followed by 4 police officers with guns drawn. He looked at me, at Celeste, at Marcus still gasping on the floor, and his expression was pure relief. "Thank God. I was trying to call you for an hour. When Simone said Marcus had texted her asking for an emergency supply of sedatives, I knew he was planning something tonight. We were already on our way." The police officers swarmed Marcus, pulling him to his feet and handcuffing him. He was shouting about false accusations, about me breaking into his property, about patient confidentiality. Nobody was listening. Detective Sarah Chen, Jake's former partner who'd met us at the precinct earlier, took my statement while paramedics checked Celeste. They wanted to take her to the hospital immediately for a full evaluation and to start flushing the drugs from her system. She refused to let go of my hand. "I'm not leaving my mother," she said. "I just got her back." "We'll go together," I promised. "I'm not letting you out of my sight ever again." In the ambulance on the way to Mount Sinai, Celeste leaned her head on my shoulder. She was exhausted, drugged, traumatized, but she was alive. She was herself. She was my daughter. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all those things I said at the restaurant, about you not being there when I was young. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did. And you were right." I kissed the top of her head. "I wasn't there enough. I prioritized my career over you too many times. But I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm never leaving again. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much, more than anything in this world." The lights of the city blurred past the ambulance windows. I thought about the past 3 months, the funeral, the grief, the moment I saw Celeste on Madison Avenue, and my entire world shifted. Every choice that led to this moment. Marcus was in custody. Simone Keller was cooperating with the police. The evidence was overwhelming. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. And my daughter was alive. We'd won. Against impossible odds, against a monster who'd thought he'd covered every angle, we'd won. But I knew the hard part was just beginning. Celeste would need months, maybe years, of therapy to recover from what Marcus had done to her. The drugs had damaged her memory. She had PTSD. She'd lost 3 months of her life. Still, as I sat in that ambulance holding my daughter's hand, feeling her warmth, hearing her breathe, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 months. Hope. The first week after we got Celeste back was the hardest. The doctors at Mount Sinai kept her for 5 days while they monitored her vitals and worked to flush the drugs from her system. She had seizures twice as her body adjusted to being without the cocktail of sedatives Marcus had been pumping into her. I stayed in her hospital room the entire time, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair by her bed, refusing to leave even when the nurses told me I needed rest. Patricia came every day with clean clothes for me and food I didn't eat. Jake stopped by with updates on the case. Marcus had been formally charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, and about 15 other crimes that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life. He'd tried to make bail, but the judge denied it after the prosecutor presented evidence that he'd been planning to flee the country. They'd found plane tickets to Brazil in his apartment, scheduled for 2 days after I'd rescued Celeste. We'd been that close to losing her forever. Doctor. Simone Keller had given a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was facing 3 years in prison and the permanent loss of her medical license, but at least she wouldn't spend the next 30 years behind bars like Marcus would. She came to the hospital once to apologize to Celeste in person. My daughter listened, nodded, and then asked her to leave. Forgiveness would take time, if it ever came at all. The media went crazy once the story broke. Respected surgeon kidnaps his own niece after embezzling her inheritance and faking her death. It was sensational, the kind of story that dominated news cycles for weeks. Reporters camped outside my apartment building and the hospital. They called constantly, offering money for exclusive interviews. I refused all of them. This wasn't their story to tell. It was ours, and we wanted privacy to heal. When Celeste was finally discharged, I brought her home to my apartment. Her own apartment in Brooklyn was still considered a crime scene while police collected evidence of Marcus's surveillance equipment. She didn't want to go back there anyway. Too many bad memories of discovering the cameras, of realizing she was being watched, of the fear that had consumed her final weeks before Marcus took her. We set her up in her old room, the one I'd kept exactly as she'd left it. She cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the tangible proof that I'd never given up on her, that I'd kept her memory alive even when everyone said I needed to move on. "You really thought I was dead," she said that first night, sitting on her childhood bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and posters from college. "For 3 whole months, you believed I was gone." I did. It was the worst 3 months of my life. I sat down next to her, but some part of me, some instinct I couldn't explain, never fully accepted it. "When I saw you on Madison Avenue, everyone thought I was crazy. Even I thought maybe I was losing my mind, but I knew. Mothers know." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner about what Marcus was doing. About the money, the cameras, all of it. I was trying to handle it myself. I didn't want to worry you. You were protecting me. I understand that. But Celeste, from now on, we protect each other. No more secrets. No more trying to handle things alone. We're a team, okay?" "Okay." The recovery process was slow and painful. Celeste started therapy 3 times a week with a specialist in trauma and memory disorders. The ketamine and benzodiazepines had caused significant damage to her short-term memory. She had gaps, entire days or weeks from before the kidnapping, that were just gone. She couldn't remember her last birthday. She couldn't remember the names of some of her clients. She'd lost skills too. Simple things like her computer password, her favorite coffee order, the route she used to walk to get to her favorite park. But she was determined. Every day, she worked on rebuilding what Marcus had taken from her. She went through old photos, read her old journals, reconnected with friends who filled in the missing pieces of her life story. Some memories came back, others didn't. Her therapist said they might never return fully, that we had to accept this new version of Celeste who was similar to, but not quite the same, as the daughter I'd known before. I loved her anyway. I loved her fiercely, protectively, with an intensity that surprised even me. 3 months after the rescue, Celeste started designing again. Just small projects at first, logos for friends' businesses, invitation cards for Patricia's therapy practice. Her hands shook the first few times she opened her design software. She'd cry in frustration when she couldn't remember techniques she used to know instinctively. But she kept going. She was stronger than Marcus had ever understood. 6 months after the rescue, we went to Marcus's trial together. Celeste had to testify, had to sit in front of a courtroom full of strangers and describe what he'd done to her. She wore a navy blue dress and kept her hair pulled back so everyone could see her face. I sat in the front row and watched my daughter tell her truth with a steady voice that never wavered. Marcus stared at her the entire time. Not with remorse, with hatred. Like even now, even facing life in prison, he resented her for surviving him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 45 years in prison without possibility of parole. He'd be 97 years old before he could even apply for release. He'd die in prison, and I felt no sympathy for him whatsoever. After the sentencing, Celeste and I went to dinner at that Italian restaurant on 63rd Street, the place where we'd had our last fight before everything happened. We ordered pasta and wine and talked about nothing important. The weather, a movie Celeste wanted to see, a new design project she was excited about. At one point, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I forgive you, you know, for the things you said that day, about me throwing away my potential. You don't need to forgive me. You were right. I was controlling and overbearing, and I put my vision of success above your happiness. Maybe. But you also loved me enough to never stop looking for me. You loved me enough to trust your instincts when everyone said you were crazy. You loved me enough to walk into a dangerous situation without knowing how it would end." She squeezed my hand. "That's the kind of mother I hope I am someday, if I ever have kids." I started crying right there in the restaurant, happy tears this time. 1 year after the rescue, Celeste moved back into her own apartment. Not the one in Brooklyn. She'd sold that place and used the money as down payment on a small studio in the West Village. Closer to me, but still her own space, her own life. She was doing well, really well. She'd rebuilt her design portfolio and was getting bigger clients again. Her memory issues were manageable. She still had nightmares sometimes, still had panic attacks if she saw someone who looked like Marcus from a distance. But she was healing. We both were. I'd gone back to work part-time, consulting for my old agency on major campaigns. It felt good to use my brain for something other than obsessing over trauma and recovery. But I made sure to keep Wednesdays free for lunch with Celeste. That tradition was sacred now. On the 1-year anniversary of the day I'd seen her on Madison Avenue, the day our lives changed forever, we went back to that spot. We stood on the sidewalk where I'd grabbed her arm and she'd called me crazy, where everything had started to unravel and then, eventually, had come back together. "Do you remember that day at all?" I asked her. "Before I showed up at the apartment?" "Pieces of it. I remember feeling scared when you grabbed me. I remember your face, how desperate you looked. I remember thinking there was something familiar about you, but I couldn't place it." She turned to look at me. Marcus had me so confused. He'd convinced me that any memories I had of you were false, planted by the drugs he said I'd been taking before he saved me. It's sick, looking back on it. How thoroughly he'd twisted my perception of reality. But you broke through it. When it mattered, when I needed you to remember, you did. Because you never gave up on me. You kept fighting even when it seemed impossible. She hugged me tight. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for finding me, for saving me, for loving me enough to never let go. Always, baby, always." We stood there for a long time, 2 women who'd survived something terrible and come out the other side changed, but unbroken. The city moved around us, thousands of people rushing past with their own stories, their own tragedies and triumphs. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Broken by grief, convinced my daughter was dead, certain my life was over. I thought about the woman I was now, stronger, wiser, more grateful for every single moment. Marcus had tried to destroy us. He'd tried to steal my daughter's identity, her future, her very self. He'd tried to make me believe she was gone forever. But he'd failed. We were still here. We were still standing. We were still a family. And that, more than anything else, felt like victory. We walked to our favorite coffee shop, ordered our usual drinks, and sat by the window watching the world go by. Celeste pulled out her tablet and showed me her latest design work. I told her about a campaign I was developing for a nonprofit that helped women escape domestic violence. We were normal. We were okay. We were alive. And for the first time in over a year, when I thought about the future, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope.